is a book about creative living, which is a slightly different term than creativity. My definition personally of creativity is that it's the intersection between a human's labor and the mysteries of inspiration, which is kind of grand. But my definition of creative living is much simpler. Creative living is any life that you live where your decisions are based more strongly on your curiosity than your fear. That's it. And if you consistently, habitually, routinely, at every sort of intersection and decision in your life, make decisions that are based on curiosity rather than fear, then you will be engaging with creativity at some level at some point. And it won't look like my life. It won't look like your life. It won't look like anybody else's life, because everyone's curiosity is different. So everybody's path of following curiosity will have a different outcome. But your life itself will sort of become a work of art if you can consistently live that way. Not easy, but so worth it. So worth the trouble. Everyone is a creative person. It's the hallmark of our species. I don't divide, I'm stealing this line from my friend Brene Brown, but here we go. I don't divide the world between creative people and non-creative people. I define the world between people who use their creativity and people who don't. We are all creative. Your ancestors were, my ancestors were. It's the hallmark of our humanity. And the essence of our creativity as human beings, and what differentiates us largely from every other species on Earth, is this weird, burning desire to take nothing and turn it into something, or to take a thing and redesign it into another thing, or to take something broken and fix it, or to take something that's this way and flip it upside down. There's this desire to manipulate our world, for better or for worse. Every inch of this planet has been altered by human creativity, by this desire to change things, that the way it is isn't good enough. Which other animals don't seem to suffer from this, you know? Like deer don't walk around the forest being like, we need to move all of these trees to this side of the river. You know, I guess beavers do when they dam things and they manipulate their world a little bit, but we do it kind of restlessly and relentlessly, and some of it is kind of an engineering project to make human life easier and to be more practical. But a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is just a kind of aesthetic choice. I want to decorate this thing. I want this to be a different color. I want this to sound differently than it does. We all seem to have this impulse to sort of leave our handprint on the wall of our life and say, I was here and I changed things around a little bit while I was here, and then after I left, things were different than they were before I arrived. And I don't know still to this day, as much as I've spent my life engaging with this and writing about it and thinking about it, why we have these impulses. I just know that we have them, and that if they are not expressed, bad things happen inside the neighborhood of your mind. It needs to be done. We need to be working with this at some level or another. Unused creativity is not benign. It becomes a sort of engine against yourself. And so my book is really about trying to give people permission and entitlement and liberation to start to work with their creativity again, even if they haven't done so in years. You know, Eat, Pray, Love changed my life in a billion ways, but I mean, we can start at the sort of most material level and go down to the most sort of subtle level, but at the most material level, I got very wealthy because of this. That was not something I ever expected or planned for in my life. When I committed to living the life of a creative person as a writer, I'm so non-delusional about what that probably means that I really felt as a young person that I had taken a vow to poverty, like a nun. Not to celibacy in my case, but to poverty, absolutely. And I was fine with that. And so that was very unexpected. And it brought great liberation. And it also brought great accountability, because I felt like, okay, very few creative people get this kind of wealth. And glancingly few women have ever had this kind of wealth from their own work. So do not waste this being stupid. Like, don't pull a Mike Tyson here and buy 6 white Siberian tigers. Actually, I think it was 3 that he bought. But anyway, use this well, use this charitably well, use this in your family's life well, and use this creatively well. you now have the liberty to do whatever the hell you want creatively, because I no longer have to subsidize this in other ways. I don't have to go to, like, so for me, the best use of that affluence that came after Eat, Pray, Love was to write the book, The Signature of All Things, because here's a conversation I didn't have to have. I didn't have to go to any publishing houses and sit under a fluorescent lit office and say to them, hey, people who just published my confessional memoir about my journey around the world, guess what I want to do now? I want to write a 500-page historical novel about a virgin in the 19th century who spends her life studying moss and botany. Can you give me an advance for that? Because no one would have. Like, they don't want me to write that book, but I can now. I can actually just say, well, because I want to do this strange creative endeavor, I can. And what I really should be doing, because I'm in a position to be comfortable enough to do it, is the hardest thing I can possibly do. I should be writing the books that women never got to write. I should be writing the books that are like require an enormous amount of research, require an enormous amount of travel, and require an enormous amount of creative autonomy, because to do so is the only way to honor all those women who came before me who didn't have that kind of opportunity, didn't have that kind of space, didn't have that kind of time. So I think the message that came to me was, don't go small now. Like, don't play it safe now, because now you have what everybody wishes they had, which was freedom and autonomy. So that was huge. The other huge thing was getting an audience of women all over the world who welcomed me into their lives and trusted me with their community. Enormous. And that's continued for me on social media and in live appearances, where I feel like we are having this giant circular conversation about what it means to be a woman right now. And I'm so honored that people let me be part of that conversation in such a big way. The funny thing is that after Eat, Pray, Love became so, when it went like tsunami in the world, people would say to me, your life must be so crazy now. This must be so crazy. They made a movie, Julia Roberts played you. Your life must be so crazy now. And it's taken me years to figure out how to articulate this, but that's not what it felt like. My life was crazy before Eat, Pray, Love. I did all the crazy in my life in my 20s and 30s long before anyone ever heard of me or knew about me. Eat, Pray, Love was the beginning of my sanity. Like, that journey that I took and those questions that I asked and that research that I did in that year that I devoted to myself was when I stopped being crazy. And everything that came after that was frosting and benefit, but it was like there was this tornado going on around me, but I wasn't a tornado anymore. That was the really cool thing. All my tornado was before that. So I feel like the greatest gift Eat, Pray, Love gave me was it made me sort of calm just in time for when I became a public figure. Because if I had had that kind of success in my 20s before I was a grounded person, I would have been getting out of limousines with no underwear. I guarantee you, it would have not been. I was not ready for that kind of thing. But it happened at the right moment, and then all I could be was grateful, and watch it and be like, wow, that's really interesting. Can't believe that happened. But be sane at the middle of it, which was really a great blessing. Never mix shades of red. No. The best advice. My mom was a nurse, and back in the 70s, she worked for Planned Parenthood at the beginning of, I'm not going to say the beginning of the birth control movement, because that was obviously a lot earlier in the 20th century, but right after Roe versus Wade in the United States, she was responsible for opening one of the first family planning clinics in the town next to the town where I lived. I spent a lot of my childhood there. She may not even remember having told me this, but I remember asking her one time what her job was like. And this was when I was a teenager, and I was asking her this. And she said, I meet a lot of women at the moment of one of the biggest decisions that they have to make in their lives. And they come to this clinic and they have to make very real, very important, very life consequential decisions about what they're going to do now. And she said, all I can ever say to them is such a beautiful sentiment. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else say it so well. She said, all I can ever tell them at that moment is, you can only make this decision based on what you know today. And so what you're going to have to do, whatever you decide to do about this pregnancy, about this person that you're involved with, about this situation that you're in, all you know is what you know right now. And the decision's going to have to be made based on that. So you are going to have to pre-forgive yourself for what you don't know yet. And it may be that years later, when you have more information about your life and about the world, you may look back on the decision you made this day, whatever it is, and you may wish you had made a different decision, but you have to begin right now forgiving yourself for what you can't know yet. I feel like that is the most compassionate possible advice that anybody could be given when they're making a difficult decision in your life. And then later to go back and look, because we spend so much time mired in regret about things we should have known, things we should have done, things we shouldn't have done. And at some point there's this mercy that you have to show to yourself that says, every decision I've ever made in my life, I made based on what I knew then. And that's all I had to work with. You can't know something before you know it. It's just a rule of life. And I think about some of the stuff I've done in my life and how stupid it was. And I look back on a younger version of myself and think, how could you have not known better? And the only compassionate and merciful response is, because I didn't yet. And maybe I had to do that terrible, stupid thing in order to learn so that I could become a more mature person who wouldn't do it again. Maybe I had to do it 10 times. Maybe I had to do it for 15 years. Maybe I had to do it for 30 years. But you're not going to learn something until you learn it. And then at that moment, you must immediately forgive younger versions of yourself for what she didn't know yet. And you must, in advance, like, I have to sort of look ahead and be like, I know that when I'm 56, I'm going to look back at myself now at 46 and be like, how could you not have seen? You can't see what you don't see yet. And I think what we're most missing in our lives, both in the public level, in the private level, and in the personal level, is mercy. You know, just the sense of mercy. We're all doing the best we can with what we know at any given moment, and we simply cannot do better than that. I can't, you can't, your family can't, the world can't. It's all we've got. So be a little gentler with yourself and with others and their mistakes as well.